Is it accepted that people think that fairies existed at one point?
Yes.
Interesting.
So I think depending on the view that you want to call them, if there are actually people that categorize them as preternatural and not supernatural, that would mean that they have to be within our realm of existence and they are just extra. Hi everyone, I'm Em.
And I'm Liv.
And we're your Meta PsycKicks. First, Happy New Year! Make the screen go like this or something.
So today we're going to be talking about mythological beasts and we're going to start a series about it. So today we're specifically going to go into fairies. There were a lot of different fae beings and fae folk, but we're specifically doing fairies. So we're gonna go into like the lore and history of what people think fairies are, and we are also going to talk to a few fairies and give our perspective as psychic mediums of what fairy and fae life is like.
Because Em has two spirit guides that are fairies.
Well, I have one that's a fairy and then I have one that is a fae folk.
So that's why you are gonna have to tell me if they tell you things. I don't have fairies around me. I was asking for the dark fairy to help me last night and he's like, you're not looking in the right direction. I was like, this is what I'm doing. Give me the sass.
There's another one with you. Who's that?
Is it a girl one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I was listening to.
Oh.
Yeah, because he wants me to...
Is she blonde?
Yeah.
Okay.
He wants to rip me down the rabbit hole and that's something that I can't do because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to give you what I got now. So she told him to step off. We are scratching the surface of fairies right now, guys.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into fairy lore.
Yeah, this is going to be very generalized. So if there's a specific fairy in a specific culture or group of fae folk you wish for me to cover after this introduction, let us know in the comments.
We could literally just have a series on fairies.
We could have an entire channel about fairies.
We could.
Without further ado, fairies! They're called fairies generally. However, you can also call them fae with an A or with an E, depending on how you want to spell it. There's a lot of, because English is hard, and the French had their hand into this, there's a lot of different IEs, A's, and that are all switched and jumbled around, but they mean different things when you're reading them.
Okay.
So I think that when I was learning about the perception of fairies, a lot of how the word and etymology of fairies came along influenced their perceptions culturally. Aside from fairies, the things with wings that you associate them with, or sprites or whatever, fairy has also been used to describe other mythological creatures that are labeled as, quote, enchanted or magical. So in layman's term, the word fairy has also been used to describe things such as goblins and gnomes and elves.
But isn't that just fae?
And
or
sprites.
Is fairy and fae the same word?
No, they're completely different.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So if the word fairy has been used to describe other types of magical or enchanted beings, however, those beings are not necessarily fairies. So that's where a lot of people could get the impression that fairies are bad, because if someone's reading a story about a goblin or an orc or some bad mythological being and the word fairies used, then you could get that negative connotation of that these things are bad.
So then what makes them a fairy? Because dragons aren't fairies.
Exactly, but at one
they're
point,
an enchanted being.
That's why it gets really weird, because some people are like, you can't talk about fairies, they're gonna steal your soul. And then other people in other religions think that fairies are super, super cool. But if fairy, the word fairy, was used to describe a mythical being that wasn't them, but was actually negative in its existence, now you have people thinking, because they don't understand what word they're reading, actually is fairy.
What wouldn't fairy just be the beings from the fae realm?
Yes.
Because that would make more sense.
Fairy.
Because dragons aren't in the fae realm.
The word fairy is now used to represent a single individual that resides in the realm of fae.
Wonderful. So that's why people think fairies are evil.
And it comes from the vulgar Latin word of fata, meaning fate. And because Europeans have taken accountability for fae in their culture, that's also associated with Germanic culture. Now we're working with the English language, which is a Germanic language. So is the French. French is a Romance language. However, they're all very similar. So fata in French means fate or fated, whereas fata or fae, F-E-Y, in the Germanic language, which is also used to represent fairies, means doomed. or damned. So the Germans were like, oh, the Fae or Fata are not good, they're doomed. And they're also associated with women that work in witchcraft. Makes sense how so many people could get all of these things wrong just because they don't know the etymology of it.
Interesting.
Exactly. When you get to more modern religions, such as Christianity, I read two different things. One was that, like during Noah or something, there was there was a woman that was seen with the trees and helping people, so they associated her with the word fata or fée, which was the French word of a woman that is doomed but has knowledge about herbs, stones, and I don't know, language.
They see them as witches.
Yes.
Got it.
So in one Christian ideology of them, they saw her as a witch but called her a fairy. So Christians wouldn't like fairies because they would associate them as a witch.
Beings because they have spells and like that.
Yes. But then there's another variation of Eve was washing her children in the stream, but she didn't want God to know that she had the children, so she hid them from him.
Okay.
And then when he finally did like a roll call of her children, he was like, "You're a liar. You didn't tell me that you had all of your children, so now I'm going to cast them out of heaven."
Interesting.
So they think that they're children, babies cast out of heaven that were related to Eve because she did something bad.
Okay.
It's absolutely crazy. But then there's another religion where people think that fairies or fata fée, the ones that are women associated with like loosely witchcraft related knowledge, that in certain religions people will have birthing rooms and they'll specifically build in a hospital or in their house a room for the fairies to come.
That's so cute.
To help with the birthing, because that goes back to fairy tales, where you have the fairy tale of Snow White. Now, who are the women that came to bless the baby? Fairies. Fairy godmothers.
Got you.
Yes. So it's all so absolutely intertwined in just, are they nature spirits? Are they women that have a knowledge of enchanted things or witchcraft that help people? Or are they looked down upon because women that had the ability to help people medically weren't cool socioculturally, so now we brand them as witches? And not only an entire religion, but also in people's cultures. So what are fairies? That's the big question. Where do fairies come from? People in different religions think that fairies come from different places depending on their religious and folklore beliefs. So before I researched the research that I did for this video, Em and I were talking about fairies because when we were learning about spirit guides during this spiritual journey of Meta PsycKicks, we figured out that Em has one spirit guide that is a fairy. And
technically I have two.
Now she has a second one, which we just found out 3 weeks ago?
Something like that.
It doesn't really matter. She has two fairy guides, and both of them look different. I was very confused the first time I talked to her second fae guide because she looks like she's a mermaid, but I'm like, are you a mermaid? Because I was a mermaid in a past life, but I know that actual mermaids don't look like that because they're not pretty. And her fae guide looks like
like a mermaid from The Little Mermaid.
Yes.
Like a beautiful woman with a tail.
Mm-hmm. But she's like, I'm not a mermaid, I'm a fairy. And I'm like,
that makes no sense.
I'm losing my mind. Anyways, when we were researching and learning about our spirit guides, we got an understanding of how fairies work. So I learned that there is space in between the particles and atoms that make up physical objects. So all of the things, all of the atoms and particles that make up your body and your cells have space between them.
It's the space between the like nucleus of an atom and the electrons, right? That's what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. The dead space in between those two things.
Yeah.
So if you were to get rid of all of the dead space or free space in between the particles that create your physicality, you would be approximately the size of a sugar cube.
Yeah.
And when I learned this information, the Fae stepped forward, or the fairies, and they said, That's how we exist within nature. You were wondering the other day where we are in nature and how we live or exist. And that's not how it is. We live within the space between the particles of nature. So when people say, I saw a fairy in the woods, they came out from behind a tree, it's probably because that fairy actually lives in that tree and walked out of it to talk to you.
Yeah, so the way that I like to think about it is you have our realm, and then if you took like a transparent piece of paper and put their realm on top of ours. So they might have like houses and like villages, but we can't see it because it's in the in-between, the piece of paper that is in between our realm and the spirit realm.
Yeah, you would think that the space in between your cells is larger than the sugar cube size that you've been condensed to. So in like an existence or spatial perspective, that's a lot more space to exist in spiritually as energy than it takes for you to exist as a physical being. And when I talk to souls, because you're probably like, well, how does that even work? That doesn't mean, you're just literally saying that a physical being can be within the particles of things.
Well, they're not physical.
Yes. So when I'm talking to souls, or Em is talking to souls as a medium, the only thing we're doing is talking to the energy of somebody. We have our physical bodies, but then we have our souls. Our physical bodies hold a quantifiable amount of energy that is explained by the third law of thermodynamics. However, I believe that there's a separation between your physical body and your soul, both of which have energy and exist at different frequencies. So if your soul leaves your body after you pass, then that energy has to exist at some sort of frequency to exist in a space. It doesn't have to be a physical space because your soul isn't physical energy. So that would explain like spirit or heaven or whatever realm of existence you want to understand in which souls reside. However, similarly to souls, fairies reside within the space between the particles of existence. And if they're a part of a tree, they would be a tree fairy. If they're a part of the particles between grass, it would be a grass fairy, so on and so forth.
Do fairies have a place in which they exist? Like, do they have a planet, is what I'm asking.
Not a single place, no.
So are there multiple planets, or they just live in the in-between of everyone else's space? Sorry. I'm already asking you the big questions.
Yeah, I haven't even done the scratching of the surface.
I know, but you're like telling me about different cultures of fairies, but maybe they're not just necessarily different cultures of fairies, but they could be from different planets, but also they could just be a part of that culture because they're supposed to help that part of the world because they're in the in-between between two dimensions. Was that a lot of information?
Yes. This is a scratch and sniff sticker, and I haven't even gotten to the scratching or the sniffing part, and you're just ripping it off.
I know, ask your friend there.
She literally pulled out a scroll and went like this.
Oh, it's a lot way more complex.
And rolling.
So is it both?
Yes.
There are planets of fairies, and then there are also fairies that don't have a planet. They just exist in the in-between between dimensions.
She says you need to not think of them as aliens. There's not a physical planet in which they exist because they reside between the spaces of certain dimensions.
Yeah.
So if you have a physical planet, there may be fae that are able to be within the physical space of that physical dimension. However, they are non-physical beings such as spirits. They are spiritual beings.
Yeah, because I was thinking of it as like, if they're like us, but they're just like fairies, then they could have a planet where they have different cultures of fairies, and that's what the people here see. Or it was, these fairies are in the in-between between our dimension and the spiritual dimension, and they just look different because they're helping specific cultures of people.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one or the other, so
she was like, don't think of us as physical beings. We reside within the space between physicality and existence itself. So we don't have a physical plane of existence in which we have something. We're not like aliens. She made me hear the Jetsons. You know, like when they go around in their little cars and it makes that like noise when they fly. She was like, that is not us. So I wrote down that they're not a single batch candy. They don't come from like one single place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is why you have so many different cultures describing them in different ways. Because they're actually different beings that fall into the fae folk.
Yes. The way they explain it to me is the same way we have different types of, or different like heritages of people.
Yeah.
It would be like you have the Italian fairies, you got the Scottish fairies, you got the Celtic fairies, like that. However, they're attributed to certain physical aspects of our world.
Oh, so that's why they have the cultural whatever put into them, because that's where they exist. Isn't that part of the world?
Because
in between.
Yes. So because one fairy exists in the space between the particles of one physical matter, they would be associated with that physical matter, thus having characteristics attributed to it.
Makes sense.
And then people put cultural
Got it. That's
stigma and
what they were explaining to me.
Categorization on them as well.
Well, how do you think that they figured out fairies exist?
So I was really reading that there was this one island of people that believed in the idea that fairies were precursors to humans.
Okay.
So one of them was, before us, there were people like us, but they were associated with nature. So you had the rock people, or the rock fairies. You had the water fairies. You had the mountain fairies. You had the cloud fairies. You had the tree fairies.
Yeah.
And then once those people helped create the world around them, they disappeared to make way for the people. So that was and very important to this island of people's culture to say, these prehistoric humans were more powerful for us and created all of these things in balance, so we have to find our place within the balance, since our fairy isn't necessarily us, but the world around us.
Did fairies make things in our physical realm? Or are they just in charge of them?
I think they're just a part of them.
Okay.
I think people like to worship things that they don't understand.
I think you've told me this before, but aren't they just born from them? Born from the nature spirits?
Mm-hmm. The big nature spirits. So
Yeah,
if God created rocks and then was like, "Picow, you're the rock nature spirit, make more rocks," he'd be like, "Okay," and then make more rocks, and those are the other rock spirits, which would be fairies in some sort of sense.
They're telling me that fairies, the fae people, are born from physicality, so they're the keepers of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that includes the people, because they are also physical.
Mm-hmm.
People have spiritual connections. They have a spirit, but they also have a physical body. But that's why fairies are not in the spirit realm, because they wouldn't be easily accessible to the physicality that they're connected to. There are fairies in spirit, but they're different. I asked them if they're like the gods of the natural things, and they're like, we're not gods, we're more like Pokemon. Does that make sense to you? We're like the things in the grass.
It's all about like a spiritual hierarchy.
Oh,
so like
explaining more to me.
how we talked about how,
You know how Pokemon have grass type?
yeah.
They're literally Pokemon.
Mm-hmm. That's why I tried to equate with the cult, like you have Asian people, you have Irish people, you have...
Well, it's because those people are physical. So they are connected to those physical people.
Yeah, but when you're a fairy, you're connected or associated with the physical aspect of the item in which you are a part of. So if you're a grass fairy, maybe you look like you're part of the grass. No, not necessarily.
They said that to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
It's just their
associated
type.
with the... Yeah.
They're Pokemon type. They're literally Pokemon.
Oh, okay, I get it. Grass
Yeah.
types. They can all look different, but they're grass types nonetheless.
Yes.
Ah.
They're literally Pokemon.
Yeah, that's a much better explanation than my
It's because
trying to equate it with people.
I tell Spirit to tell me things in like cartoons,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been doing it. Yeah, they're
It's a
literally
lot
like
of pressure.
Pokemon, because I literally asked them, you sound like you're a god, like you are the keeper of this physical thing, and they're like, we aren't that highly ranked. We are a Pokemon of specific type. I also don't know who I'm talking to, because there's a whole bunch of them. Okay.
Well, you have a lot of them that live in your tree over there. So.
Okay. Great, because I thought they were over there too.
Yeah, you have a lot of fairies in your yard, and we still haven't made a fairy garden, so I'm trying to figure out what certain fairies look like. So in like romanticized European versions, there's fairies that look like people, because in those beliefs, they resemble people, and they have nature aspects to them. So like butterfly wings on a lady, and they're usually in like gardens and stuff like that. So that's one depiction of fairies. Persians had fairies. They were called Paris, P-E-R-I-S, and they were attributed physically to be extravagant, angelic beings that were associated with nature or nature spirits themselves. So they usually had very long hair. They had very fair complexions, so very light skin, and that they were usually supported by wings of some sort. And I think it's interesting because people have always said like, oh, you're so fair. The word fair comes from fairies, fair folk, and the Paris view of what they looked like.
Do they look like people or do they look like other things? Like, are they just presenting as people?
They tell me yes and no.
Okay. I got
this is a
answer.
very yes and no type thing.
Yeah, because they're like showing me that some of them actually look like Pokemon type characters.
Mm-hmm.
But they present as people because they're scary otherwise to the existence on this earth.
Well, even though they're bound by physicality, they're also not. So, or part of physicality, they're not bound by it.
I don't know what you're saying.
Well, when I talk to spirits, actual human souls, they're able to change their appearance and their background because they're not bound by physicality. But if you're a fairy, you're a part of physicality, but you're not bound by it.
Yeah, but they have a specific appearance. It's like how you talk about names. People have, like, spirits have names, and they're important to them.
Well, when you asked me, I saw one that looked like a person, but then I also saw one that looked like a snake.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they tell me both as well, but it's interesting that they are telling me they also look like Pokemon.
Mm-hmm. So, it says that in some folklore, fairies have green eyes. Some depictions of fairies show them in footwear, where other depictions show them as barefoot. Other fairies had wings, and other fairies were depicted as flying by some sort of magic or self-propulsion. And then sometimes they were perched on things like ragwort stems or on the back of birds. So people also have the idea that fairies could be little tiny things like Tinkerbell, or like full-blown giant women that help you with herbs and natural remedies. So if you see a fairy perched on a bird, then you're gonna have the idea that fairies could be small. Or if you see them helping people, they could be big. But again, like Em and I said, they can do what they want. So to an extent.
Well, I think they have a form, but they can change their form because they are not a physical being.
Mm-hmm. Some of them had dragonfly wings. Some of them had bee wings. It doesn't matter. Any sort of natural thing, at least in European eyes, that's how they were depicted. However, I don't know what fairies look like in other religions, like in the West. So if you know, or you want me to figure it out and let you know, let us know in the comments. Want more specific information on fairies, given what we talked to you about today, let us know in the comments below. And if you didn't get this, we're psychic mediums and we do readings.
Yeah, so you don't have this answer of why are there trickster fairies? Because, like, there are things going around TikTok of, like, if you make a circle of rocks in your backyard and something shows up in the middle of it, then you know you're a witch. But all of the people that are actually witches are like, you should not do that because that is, like, accepting things from fairies. And in their culture, as a fairy, if you accept something from them, then you're, like, signing a contract with them, so now you are like under control of the fairies or something. It's like you sign your life away or something.
We should talk about different traditions of fairies too, because my friend, the one that we did the album video with, Julie, she believes in fairies. However, she believes in them a little bit differently. So if things go missing in her house or something goes wrong, she thinks it's the fairies and they're upset for whatever reason or acting out. So what she does is she literally takes a shot of whiskey and throws it out the window for them. And then she says that the things go away. So she gives something to the fairies to make them shut up, and then they do for her. So that would be the opposite of what you were saying, or what the people that you listen to believe.
They're telling me it's not. Fairies have a connection to physical things, which is why they take the things. But when they give them to you, it is different in their culture because they are giving a piece of themselves to you. Does that make sense?
Oh,
so if you accept it and take it out of there, you're accepting them, accepting their culture.
So Julie's not taking things from them, she's just giving it to them to make them go away. Because she doesn't accept things from them. If something goes wrong, she's just like, okay, here's some whiskey, now get out.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to half of what you were saying because they were telling me about it, but because I see little, like, poof balls, and they steal things, and they steal them because,
It's fun.
Well, yeah, but it's also, they have a connection to things like that as a fae being. So they, like, take things because in a fairy's culture, being connected to physical objects is, like, a part of other people, other fae people.
So they're spiritual kleptos. You know what a kleptomaniac is?
I mean, I know, but
Okay, good.
They're like, you took all of the, like, emotional aspects out of it.
I was trying to make a joke.
I mean, I know. But they're, like, correcting you because it's like, this is important. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if I got you, like, a rose, you would see that as, like, vulnerable and intimate because it's a rose. It's like me giving you a piece of myself, a piece of my vulnerability to you. So that's why, as a fae being, this rock is a part of, like, the things that I watch over. So it's important that I give it to you and you accept it. So you're accepting me.
And then if I take it, that's bad.
Well, if you take it, you now have a contract with me because you have a part of me. It's like if you were married to someone and you got rock. They're showing me, like, penguins and rocks. I'm sorry.
And I give you rocks
like,
all
I give
the
you
time.
rock. You have to take care of rock. If you don't take care of rock, we're not friends anymore.
So their friendship is also held in a higher regard. So if you take something from them and you don't reciprocate the friendship and you don't text them every day, they get bitchy.
Well, it's like if I were to give you a like an engagement ring and you were just to, like, throw it on the sink.
I get that.
Connection.
Oh no, I get
It's
that. I
connection.
literally gave someone a Christmas present and they crumpled it up in front of my face. And I was
Because
like, I'm sad.
To them, as a fae being, their connection to physicality is so important that if you throw away their rock, it's like throwing away them. So that's why they, like, get angry when it happens.
Got it. So if you get something from them, you have to keep it. Or just don't do it.
Yeah. Or just don't accept them into your life.
Yeah.
It's like, don't accept the proposal.
You asked why there are, like, dark ones. They don't say that they're necessarily dark. It's like the gods where they have trickster gods.
Yeah.
They're not bad. They just teach you lessons in a different way.
They're the poison type of Pokemon.
Well, they're also the yin to the yang.
Well, yeah.
There's ones that give gifts, and then there's ones that make you prick your finger on a needle because they didn't get an invitation.
So, if you guys enjoyed our rant about fairies, next week we're going to be doing a video hopefully about dragons, or dragons is going to be before this. Either way, make sure you subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss out on any of our other content. And if you want us to cover any other mythological beasts, make sure to leave that in a comment, and we will see you guys in the next one. Also, check out our podcast because we're going to talk more in depth about fairies.
And our Patreon if you want to talk to us and other people about fairies.
We should add mythological beasts to our Discord server.
I was just thinking it before you said it. I will see you in the next one. We are your Meta PsycKicks. God, that was too much for me.
Yeah, I believe what I'm seeing more when I know that I can't make it up. So when I see a stick, paper, wet, goopy man that is walking around on the strings of time, I know that I can't make that up in my head.
Yeah, see, for me, it's the other way around. That's why you're good at talking to those things, and I'm good at talking to the people.
You just don't believe when you see them.
No, Victoria's telling me right now, not even Victoria, the pretty fairy lady right now is telling me you have seen us and talked to us before, but you don't remember because you were told that it wasn't correct.